Alright, it's that time again. Time to catch up with me on WandaVision before you watch the new episode that drops on Disney Plus on Friday. So without further ado, let's talk television. Alright, we're gonna break this episode up just like we did last one, where we talk about things that we've learned, things that we now know are fact in this show. And then things we think we know based off of conjecture, of comics, and also just like things we've noodled around, and by we I mean me, but I want to talk to you guys about it. And then things that we're waiting for answers on, which I am sure you guys have tons of questions, and I do too. So, we'll start with things we do know. I of course have my handy dandy color-coded notes. These are notes. So if I'm not making intense eye contact with you, that's why. And if you want to know about what we know, what we think we know, and things we definitely don't know, from episode 1 through 3, there's a prior video on that which I will link somewhere. I always forget which side it goes on. Somewhere. Okay. So we start episode 4, and we've gone all the way back to the time period of Spider-Man Far From Home, when Spider-Man Far From Home starts, where everybody's just coming back from the blip, like just. Like we see Monica Rambeau materialize in a hospital by an empty hospital bed. So we know that Monica blipped, and unfortunately we also know that Maria Rambeau, her mom and best friend of Captain Marvel, passed away from cancer. We also learn that Maria Rambeau is to S.W.O.R.D. as Peggy Carter was to S.H.I.E.L.D., as in she set up S.W.O.R.D. and she pioneered it, which means that Monica grew up there and now she works there. Very cool. She's sent to work on a missing persons case with FBI agent Jimmy Woo, who we saw in Ant-Man, who had a wonderful glow up where he admired Scott Lang's card trick and then he learned it himself. So very proud of you, FBI agent James, aka Jimmy Woo. And we learn that the town of Westview doesn't actually exist. When Monica goes to meet up with Jimmy Park, there's local law enforcement standing outside of Westview, which has this crazy sort of barrier around it. And they're like, this isn't a real town. This town didn't exist before, which is really interesting. And we learned that that little helicopter that Wanda picked up in episode 2 was actually a S.W.O.R.D. drone. And in the same vein, we learned that the man who appeared from the sewer, who was wearing a beekeeper outfit, was actually part of S.W.O.R.D. and he was wearing a hazmat suit. So we also know that Wanda is using her powers to protect herself from the real world, whether she knows it or not. Now, she voluntarily sent the beekeeper away, but when she picked up the helicopter, she seemed confused. We also learned that people are missing in the real world who are playing roles in WandaVision, right? So they're not playing themselves. Darcy Lewis shows up on the scene, and it also sends us all the way back to the first episode. Darcy Lewis is a doctor of astrophysics, and she is recruited with a bunch of other different kinds of scientists, as well as like all of the military that's ever existed, to go and figure out what's going on in Westview, right? Because they have no clue at this point. And Darcy is the one who figures out that they can basically take this wave that she sensed with some science gear. I'm sorry, I'm only into soft sciences. But she plugs it into an old-timey TV, and that's how they're watching WandaVision. And we learned that at the end of the first episode, when we saw somebody close a book and like turn off the thing, and we were like, ooh, somebody's watching, that was Darcy. And so it wasn't quite like as nefarious as maybe it was set up to seem at first. That being said, we have lots of questions about S.W.O.R.D. and we'll get there later. Something we know is that people who are playing the roles of other characters within the WandaVision world don't seem to know that they're doing that when Wanda's powers are working 100%. And you can see that every time Wanda gets distracted by something, whether she's stressed, whether she's going into labor or whatever, her powers sort of are on the fritz, right? And so we've seen, like, for instance, in episode 2, where that voice comes over the radio that's like, Wanda, who's doing this to you? First of all, we know that that's Jimmy Woo, with the help of Darcy Lewis, trying to get a signal into Wanda in order to try and ask her what's going on because they have no clue. But we also see the woman who's in that scene sort of freak out, like, who are you? What's going on? But then when Wanda edits the show, everything's back to normal. And once again, when Wanda's sort of stressed, she's sending Geraldine, aka Monica, out of Westview because she finds out she's not who she thinks she is. The neighbors are talking like they're maybe aware of what's going on, and also one of their neighbors was using a hedge trimmer but was cutting into the cement of the wall that separates yards. And so is all sort of very strange, and I think that we can attribute that to Wanda's, you know, powers sort of being a little because she's distracted by children, labor, a woman posing as somebody who she isn't, etc., etc. And we also know for sure by the end of the episode that Monica understands that Wanda is creating and controlling this world, right? Which of course is going to lead Sword to do something, which that leads us into the things that we can speculate wildly about. So here's a couple of things that I'm speculating wildly about, if you will. Sword. Does Sword see her as some kind of weapon? That would make sense because that's what the acronym of their name means. I'm gonna put it on the screen right here. However, in the comics, a bunch of people are like, let's kill Wanda when she has this mental breakdown. Sword, I don't know, are they gonna try and live into her? I hope not. I also speculate that this show and Wanda will tie together not only Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, but the new Spider-Man movie that's coming out, as well as possibly Thor: Love and Thunder, and a possible Young Avengers movie and or series. And here's why. Buckle up, here we go. So Wanda's reality bending and time suspending powers, chaos magic is what it's called in the comics. Basically, she can control all sorts of things, including different realities, and so it would make sense that she could not only create the multiverse of madness, but also bring in the other Spider-Mans who are supposed to be in this new Spider-Man movie coming out, right? Like, how did all these other Spider-Mans from other realities get into the Spider-Man movie? And I think it's strange that Darcy would be in WandaVision with it having nothing to do with Thor: Love and Thunder. And as we know, Jane will be Thor in Thor: Love and Thunder, and I wonder if Wanda has something to do with that, like creating an alternate reality or something. Again, it's different in the comics for why Jane becomes Thor, but they don't necessarily have to follow that. So it's definitely up in the air and could be connected. And as for the Young Avengers, I mentioned this before, but Billy and Tommy do exist and are born in the alternate reality that Wanda creates in the comics, but once the reality is fixed, those two kids' souls go into real kids, and they grow up apart, not knowing that they're brothers. They meet, they understand that they're brothers, and then they go and find Wanda and understand that she is their mom. But those two kids, Hawkeye, which is Kate Bishop, who we're getting a show about, and then Cassie, who's Ant-Man's kid, who we've seen as an older teen now, are all part of the Young Avengers. And so I follow this theory by saying that Evan Peters is going to be in WandaVision. That's like a fact, it's on IMDb, you can Google it, but it doesn't say who he's going to play. I think that they're going to age up Billy and Tommy to be around the age of Hawkeye and Cassie, and that Evan Peters may play Speed, who is Tommy Shepard, who is a mutant that has powers just like Pietro. It would be a fun way to loop him in because he was part of the Fox franchise before Disney acquired it, and he was able to call himself a mutant because for a while Disney mutants could not be called mutants. Money. In the comics, Monica Rambeau is a mutant named Spectrum who does work for S.H.I.E.L.D. with some other mutants we know, like Beast from the X-Men. However, they have not mentioned anything about her having special powers or being a mutant or anything like that. In fact, they haven't said the M word the entire time of this series, so I don't want to confuse you guys. But there was a scene when Monica just woke up from the blip and she's sort of running around frantically trying to figure out where her mom is, not knowing that her mom is passed, and she runs into a dude who just like cold clock hits the floor. You know what I mean? Like, that to me signifies that perhaps she's stronger than we think. Whether she knows it or not is also a mystery, which gets on later in the part of the episode, but you know what I mean. So I think that they may be sort of setting up or demonstrating that Monica is not quite human, maybe, and I might be reading into what was literally 2 seconds of the episode a little too much, but I thought it was worth mentioning. So I speculate that Vision won't actually come back from the dead. And the reason why is because at the end of episode 4, we return to WandaVision, right? We're no longer viewing WandaVision from S.W.O.R.D. We're viewing WandaVision like we have for the previous 3 episodes. And we get sort of an extended cut of the end of episode 3 where Wanda pushes Monica Rambeau completely out of Westview. And Vision comes in and he's like, oh, what happened to Geraldine? And Wanda's like, oh, she had to go home. Well, when Wanda turns around, she sees Vision's corpse, not like Vision like normally, but his corpse with the stone taken out of his head, like what happened with Thanos. And she kind of shields her eyes, and then she looks up and everything is normal. So I have to assume that some of the reality and some of her trauma is sort of bubbling up to the surface, and yeah, that wasn't good. I don't know if she's just like hanging out somewhere with his corpse, which would be really, really macabre. I don't think Marvel would do that, but I'm interested to know why. I'm also interested to know why she hasn't like created a fake Pietro, except for maybe that Aaron Taylor Johnson didn't want to be in the show. I don't know if that's true or not either, but yeah. Anyway, that's also why I think that Vision won't come back, because she hasn't created Pietro, and I think it would be like too painful for her to have like 2 dead dudes just hanging out. So here's what we don't know. I speculated about Vision, but we don't know if Vision is alive or dead. You could see FBI agent Jimmy Woo writing on a like a marker board about whether or not Vision is alive. Also, we don't know why the area that she created is hexagonal. And we don't know if they exist in the same plane of time and space, which is super weird. And we don't know if the kids are real or if they're ever gonna be real, and I'm just waiting with bated breath for that. We don't know whether or not Monica is a mutant, or if there's anything weird or special about her besides the fact that she's super cool. In fact, we haven't seen anybody else with any powers. Like, where are Falcon and Winter Soldier? Why aren't they out there with Sword? Where is literally anybody? Just anybody. Spider-Man? I don't know. I mean, like, I know they're all busy, like, filming other stuff, like, in actual reality, but, like, it's weird to me that they know that Wanda's in there and there's, like, nobody else, no other mutants, nobody with powers or anything. The military's just like, we got this. Okay. And then we don't know whether or not Wanda's being considered a weapon by Sword. We don't know if Sword is good or bad. Like, just because good people work for Sword doesn't mean that it is a good entity, right? Like, we saw that with S.H.I.E.L.D. when S.H.I.E.L.D. wanted to make those weapons that would eradicate you know, the threats before they were even threats. Like, that's no good. So we don't know exactly the function of Sword completely. Like, we know that they're like an anti-space terrorism group, but what they deem to be terrorism, who knows, right? So I think that that's pretty interesting, and certainly an angle that they could go with. I'm excited to get into episode 5, where we'll hopefully be back in WandaVision, but I'm really enjoying this dichotomy between the real world with Sword and then WandaVision. I think it's so cool how they went back in time. I think a lot of shows try and do this and it's unsuccessful, but I think it was really successful in this episode. So I'm really excited for episode 5. I hope you enjoyed catching up with me. Don't forget to hit me up on Twitter and let me know what you're thinking about the show. And also I made a TikTok because I'm hip with the children. You can follow me there too. Thanks so much for watching and tuning into Nerd News with Destiny. I'm Destiny, and I really appreciate it. And until then, I will see you guys same-ish time, same place. And until then, this has been Nerd News with Destiny.